you will have the opportunity to ask the commissioners your questions about the budget. So we'll do this using the Q&A function on your screen. So please go ahead and find that button right now so you can be prepared to send your questions our way. At the end of the call, we're going to be trying something a little bit different by using this forum for open public comment. We had 7 community members who signed up in advance for the public comment section of the call, which will happen towards the end of our meeting. And we're going to work to wrap things up by about 7 p.m. So we all look forward to spending the next 90 minutes or so with you. And now I'm going to turn things over to Commissioner Matt Jones for our land acknowledgement and for some welcome remarks from each of the commissioners.
You're muted.
Thank you. I acknowledge that I live on land within the territories of the Arapaho, Cheyenne, and Ute peoples. I acknowledge that the institution I represent was founded upon the exclusion and attempted erasure of indigenous peoples and cultures. I acknowledge the American Indian community in Boulder County today, the elders past and present, and future generations. And then we're going to each take a minute here, the commissioners, to welcome you. Thanks for attending this budget town hall. Budgets are dry things to most people, including myself in a lot of ways. They're dense, they have a lot of figures. But really, when you start looking at a budget, it's a moral document about where we put our values, where we put our money is what we value. And what we're trying to do today, separate from the normal budget process, is kind of make it more relatable to you. And you'll hear that in a few minutes. And we'll also do some quizzes on screen to bring people up to speed on a few budget issues, tax issues. But bottom line, we really appreciate you participating in this. We do work hard at public service. That's why we exist. And I'm just happy to be part of that. And I'm always lucky to represent Boulder County. I think the constituents here are generous when they go to the ballot and for fundraising and just with other people. And so thanks for doing that. Marta, Claire, you want to jump in?
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner Jones, for the introduction. My name is Martha Loachmain, Boulder County Commissioner representing District 2 in Lyons and Longmont and Allens Park, as well as the rest of our 330,000 constituents and residents here in Boulder County. So just want to first say thank you for you all participating this evening. This has been a tough year, following a previous tough and challenging year for Boulder County staff, employees, residents, first responders, community members, students, small business owners. And so just being able to be part of this organization and being part of your leadership team here locally in local government for now 9 months this year has just been a real honor, and it's been a pleasure. And I want to make sure to give thank yous to the Boulder County staff who are with us this evening, for all the folks in the background, certainly our simultaneous interpreters, to provide access to the information that we believe is just another way for us to engage community members, to provide resources, to share in other ways of transparent activities of what we're doing and how we are working to provide the best in public service for all of you as residents in Boulder County. So with that, I just want to, this is one other piece that could be really helpful for people to understand. And it's also geared up by the fact that we are right now in budget season. And so we're looking at the requests and the needs and looking at gap analysis and assessments internally and externally to make some decisions. And so I'm excited that we're all here together to talk about how we can hear from you and get your input. And of course, we'll talk about what that looks like for other participation further on. So I want to just say thank you again for everybody who's participating and your grace as we are in such a complicated time. And our job as county commissioners really is to make the difficult decisions in leading, in caring for our community as we face where we are right now in the time of a great resignation, as we are in a time of really complicated childcare reductions and the true health emergency of COVID-19, Delta variants, and other issues. So we ask you to participate. We ask you to continue to be engaged. And again, thank you to the Boulder County staff for setting us up to participate again in a virtual monthly bilingual town hall. And I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Commissioner Claire Levy.
Yeah, thank you, Marta. I am Claire Levy. I'm the 3rd County Commissioner, and it's my pleasure to be here tonight. And I want to start by thanking staff for all the work that they go through every time we put one of these things on. Hopefully to you, the public who has joined us, this is a seamless, effortless effort, but there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes, and I want to acknowledge that and thank staff for that work. It's really my pleasure to be here, and I want to thank those of you who are joining us for being with us here tonight. This is part of our effort to get out to the extent that we can and be more accessible to the public, be available to answer questions about the things that are on your mind. And so we've done our best to try to choose topics that we think are of interest to the general public. We started with just an open-ended town hall where we introduced ourselves to many of you for the very first time, since we weren't able to be at a lot of public events as we were campaigning and going to things that we ordinarily would have been going to, where we would have been able to meet you. We knew that in the pandemic, there was a lot of pressure that was put on our open spaces, and their visitor use was way up, damage to resources, conflicts in parking lots and at trailheads and things like that. And so our second one was about open space and what those challenges are and the tools that we have to try to manage those resources. And so as we move forward, we are trying to identify topics that are of interest to the public. We had another town hall on how to allocate the $63.3 million that Boulder County is receiving through the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA. And got some great comments from you, the public, our constituents, residents of Boulder County, on your needs. How has this pandemic affected you? What kinds of services and supports would help you build back your lives or recover from the impacts of this pandemic, ongoing impacts? And now we're here just to provide some background and overview on the Boulder County budget. It's a very complex document. The process is very long and arduous and complex, and our staff has been working really since May or June of this year to set us up to make the important decisions that we need to make. And I know that this isn't for everybody, as Commissioner Jones said, but we think it's important for you, the taxpayers, the people who fund these services, to have a sense of where those services go, and also take your questions about what we do fund and what we don't fund. And that's going to be what Jana Peterson is going to give you some information about. And then the three of us are going to come back and highlight just some of the very special things that we're able to do thanks to the generosity of Boulder County taxpayers. So I am going to turn the virtual mic back to Commissioner Jones, who is going to take us to our first poll question.
Thank you, Claire. This is it. Your first poll question. Here you go. What percentage, my screen just changed. What percentage of your property taxes go to county government? And so the answers, potential answers are 55%, 74%, 26%, and 100%. We'll get the answer here pretty quick. Thanks for participating. There it is, 26%. Most people were right. A lot of people are confused since we have an assessor for the county and that assesses property and a treasurer who collects property tax. But a lot of times people are confused that only 26% of the money goes to the county of that, and 55% goes to schools, and then there are a couple other categories. So you are an informed group. All right, and now what I'll do is I'll turn it over to our moderator, Jana, who will give a little background on the budget process and share dates of when the public can attend or watch meetings about the budget.
Thank you, Commissioner Jones. So, here in the United States, dating back to the days of Ben Franklin, we have really liked to joke about how painful it is to pay our taxes. Nonetheless, we've decided as a society that taxation is really the best and most efficient way to provide essential services and really make sure that communities are safe and healthy. So depending on where you're at right now, you're likely paying taxes to many layers of government: federal, state, county, your city or town, your school district or other special districts. Commissioner Jones mentioned some of those in our poll question. So all of these taxes are intended to be able to help us to live and be in a place and live in a way that supports the common good. So today, we will, of course, be focused on county government. The Boulder County adopted budget in 2021 was just a little bit under $500 million. I'm going to see if we could put a link in the chat to a summary document that shows in more detail what the adopted budget included, in case you're curious about that. But I thought I would just hit some of the highlights for you verbally as well. And I want to start with the revenue side, or the money that comes into county government to pay for county services. About 45% of the revenues that come in are from property taxes that we all pay on, commercial and residential real estate. That's our single largest source of revenue in the county budget. About 13% comes from sales and use taxes that we all pay when we purchase items and services. And so that's a little bit different from the composition of taxes that you'll see in other local governments like your cities and towns. About 24% of our revenue comes in from other types of taxes and fees, like specific ownership tax or building permits or other fees that we charge to people for specific activities. And the remaining 18% comes from other governments. And for us, primarily that's the state and the federal government in the form of pass-through funding. That pass-through funding pays for a lot of the human services programs that we administer on behalf of the federal government. So that's where all the money comes from. And now you might be wondering, where does it go? How does it get spent? And in 2021, our largest single category of expense is what we call general government. You can think of this as all those core functions provided by the county. So things like elections, your property tax appraisal process and tax collection, motor vehicle registration, the land use review process, and even public meetings like the one that we're having right now. Of the $493 million budget, about $120 million was appropriated this year for these types of basic services and for all the behind the scenes infrastructure that's required to maintain our technology, our facilities, and those sorts of things. Our next largest category after general government is health and welfare at $106 million. And this is a growing category of county spending. In this category, we administer all of the pass-through dollars for those state and federal programs that I mentioned. Examples of those are the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, other things like Medicaid eligibility, unemployment insurance, those kinds of programs. So these really are the functions that are aimed at assisting community members most in need and helping them to get to a place of self-sufficiency. We also, in this category, support specific programs for low-income residents, like our Head Start childcare program. And we operate many public health programs, not just those high-profile ones that you might be thinking about this year in the pandemic, but other health programs like restaurant inspections, childhood immunizations, environmental health like air quality monitoring. And then the final big chunk of this category includes all of the programs aimed at helping community members, both juveniles and adults, who are involved in the criminal justice system, to stay out of the system, so that might be behavioral health investments, community diversion programs, transition support after people have been convicted of crimes, and all sorts of activities in that arena. The next largest category of spending is conservation and environmental sustainability, and that comes in at $76 million. In this category is our incredible open space program. So where we protect land, we manage it, we manage water and soil and cultural resources out of that funding. It also includes our environmental sustainability initiatives, both those aimed at addressing the impacts of climate change and all of our zero waste efforts, where we're managing and diverting all the waste that we create right here in Boulder County. The next category of spending is public safety at $72 million, and this includes the sheriff's office, the coroner's office, and the district attorney. So even though the DA is a state agency, by state statute, their budget comes from county government. So the biggest component here is the sheriff's office. And for the sheriff, in addition to patrolling and providing public safety services in the unincorporated parts of Boulder County, as well as the towns of Superior and Lyons, the sheriff also operates the Boulder County Jail and provides really important public safety services like the countywide ambulance contract, animal control, disaster management. So when we have wildfires, floods, or other disasters, all of that is operated out of the sheriff's office. About $35.5 million in 2021 was allocated toward transportation. So to construct and maintain our local roads and trails and transit and culverts and bridges and all of that. And another $33 million was for other capital expenses like our building projects, renovations. When the courthouse hearing room reopens, you'll see a renovated hearing room as an example of those capital projects. And we still had about $24 million in ongoing flood recovery work in 2021 as well, as we continue to rebuild our roads and our open spaces that were impacted by the 2013 flood event. So the last category of expense that I want to mention is important to acknowledge, and that's our annual debt service. So we budgeted $25 million for that in 2021, and these debt payments have either been authorized by the voters, typically for bonds for open space purchases, or they've been directed by the commissioners to finance capital construction when we have very large projects that we can't afford to pursue within a single year budget. And so a good example of this is the purchase of the Southeast Community Hub building in Lafayette on South Public Road, and we're working on that project right now, and it will be opening to the public late next year. So one final thing that I want to cover is just to clarify that major sections of the county budget are not discretionary. We have to make our debt payments, for example. And when you dive into the details in some of those categories like conservation and environmental sustainability, you'll find that some of these revenues come from taxes that Boulder County voters approved for designated purposes, like the purchase of open space, for example. Those state and federal pass-through dollars can only be used for human services programs that we administer, and things like the Road and Bridge Fund is designated obviously for transportation improvements. So while $500 million may seem like a pretty big budget, when you look at the full scope, that full range of county services, frankly, a variety of lines of services that no private sector company would ever try to take on in one organization, you'll see that there are specific buckets of funding that are designated for specific purposes and can't be used for anything else. So in addition to tonight's town hall, you'll have an opportunity to chime in on the proposed 2022 county budget and share your opinions. We have a budget hearing coming up on Tuesday, October 26th. That's at 3 p.m. and public testimony will be taken at that hearing. So please join us on Zoom if you have the opportunity and share your thoughts about the 2022 budget. And then after the public hearing, the commissioners will deliberate and give some final direction to county staff to prepare the 2022 budget on November 9th. And that is also at 3 p.m. No public testimony is taken during that November 9th meeting, but if you tune in, you'll get the chance to hear the direction the commissioners want to go with their decision making for the budget. So with that overview, I'm going to turn things back now to Commissioner Lochamin for our next poll question.
Thank you. And I actually just love to have the board give their quick reaction and comment to your presentation before we go into our next poll question. So Commissioner Jones?
I think you nailed it, Jana. More or less, there's a budget that's in the chat. Somebody asked about is slides available. There is a budget summary document online if you Google it. That's really good. That contains that summary information. But I'm interested in getting on with this, so I'll just stop there.
Sure. Yes, and there's a PDF in that link, but we're going to re-put it in the Q&A and the Zoom chat because depending on when you jumped in, that's just one of the features of Zoom that you would miss all the previous chat. So as we learn our virtual platforms, we'll add that back in there for some of the participants who didn't get a chance to click into that PDF while we were presenting. So, just from a reaction standpoint around the budget, this is, again, another opportunity for people to understand the process and maybe not completely understand it the way our OFM folks do, but just to have a better feeling of where is that money being spent. And I think it's great from the standpoint of questions that I've heard about where are you spending your money, why are you spending your money, how are you making those decisions. Folks who do participate in our business meetings on Tuesday mornings at 10:30 weekly that have questions about some of the expenditures. And so this is a great way for folks who really do want to start learning about that process to connect some of those dots, and myself included. A couple of the learnings so far this year around the budget was the real effects of the visitorship and usership of trails, and then learning that it's our Boulder County Sheriff and that budget that gets spent to go put up signs to let folks know what areas of land are not allowed for recreational shooting, the staff that has to go out and literally do rescue. That was the learning for me. And so, some of those pieces that I think just help people understand, knowing that the flood that we were devastated by here in Boulder County in 2013, that we are still working, and this year have been making some of those funding continual decisions with not just the resource that's still being spent on the 2013 flood from staff perspective and the time, but also the funding and then all the maintenance and management of those projects. And so I think those are pieces that community members need to understand as well as we start looking at this budget process in full. So we certainly won't comment on all the information you shared, Jana, but thank you so much for being here this evening, and I'll turn it over to Commissioner Levy.
Well, thank you. And yeah, we have a lot more that we want to share with you this evening. So I'm not going to make a lot of comments right now. Jana is really a walking encyclopedia when it comes to county government. And I don't know whether she had notes in front of her or not, but I would venture to guess that she actually could have shared all of that without notes because she's got such extensive knowledge of our budget. But I do encourage you to go to the chat and click on that link, because you will find a 2-page PDF that really pretty much tells you what your county government is all about. And the new thing that we have in this year's version, I don't believe it was in the 2020 version, is how just in broad buckets we allocated the CARES Act money. That was the first tranche of funding that the county got and local governments got to try to address immediate needs that the COVID-19 pandemic created. And so you'll see the funding we spent on public health, on childcare assistance, economic and business support money, that's laid out in there. And there's also a tool on our website that gives you more information about that. So I think the main thing I want to say right now, because each of us is going to make some additional remarks here in a minute about certain areas of the budget that we wanted to go into in more detail, is to emphasize a little bit of one thing that Jana mentioned, is how little discretionary authority we actually have. When you come to the things we're statutorily required to do, which is many of the Housing and Human Services programs, and a lot of that money does come from the state and it's passed through federal funds, the sheriff, and we're required to fund a jail, the coroner's office, those things. We don't have that much left over. And I'll be talking about this a little bit more later with respect to some programs that we are able to fund thanks to the generosity of you, the voting public. But just a couple things I wanted to mention right now that I hope that you're aware of. One is that by really watching our dollars carefully, we've been able to create a brand new office here in the county, the Office of Racial Equity, and we have set aside funding in that for 3 positions. This is something that's been in the works for several years, laying the foundation to actually create this office. And so for the first time, we'll have 3 people who are dedicated to really helping us internally look at our systems, our processes, our practices, whether it's hiring, whether it's public outreach, whether it's the programs that we choose to do and how we choose to do them, to look at them through the lens of racial equity. And so that's something that for the first time we'll have in the budget, and it will be something that we can build on going forward. So I did want to mention that as a new piece of our budget, and I think really right now that's probably all I'll do, so that we can turn to the rest of the program.
Great. Let's move to poll question number 2. So the first question is, what is the Boulder County sales and use tax rate? And the options are 2.125%, 0.985%, 0.078%, or 1.005%. And we will get a tally here in a moment as you enter in your choice for that poll question number 2. All right, so we've got, looks like close here, 44% of our respondents said 2.125% as the Boulder County sales and use tax. So the responses, or the correct answer is 0.985%, or 9 cents tax on every $10 that's spent in Boulder County. The sales and use taxes, which I think is really fascinating as we're learning and putting more things into our resource kits, that tax is collected at the point of purchase. So whenever you're buying something, a retail good within Boulder County, it's collected by the state of Colorado, and it's reapportioned back to the counties and municipalities in which they were collected. So Boulder County receives less than 1% of the value of all the purchases made in Boulder County. So we're going to move to our next section of some stories and examples of tax dollars at work. And I'm going to turn it back over to Commissioner Matt Jones. We can't hear you.
2 for 2. I've only been at this a year and a half. So what I'm going to talk to you about today is so the environment, basically. You know, Boulder County is a leader in environment. There are a lot of people who are environmental activists in the county, and it's been that way for a while. And I'm going to talk about 2 dedicated sales taxes, the open space and the sustainability tax. And they relate together, and they're both environmental, and there's some overlap, and I'll get to that. The open space tax, I don't know if you know this, was passed, the first one was passed in 1993. It took 3 times going to the ballot on that, and a bunch of houses going in and subdividing lands that people expected to be open for inland forever, basically, along US 36. And also the county wanted to purchase Ohio Valley Ranch, which many of you know about. That was enough to push it over the top, and it's been reauthorized and extended and increased over the years. And it basically is to protect lands, cultural, historic artifacts, and landscapes, provide appropriate passive recreation, and to preserve agriculture. We probably wouldn't have much agriculture in this county now if we didn't have this program. And the other thing, people often think we're done with acquiring land, but the fact is, it's like a puzzle, and you got to fill in the last pieces of the puzzle, the remaining pieces of the puzzle, or it's not done. And you have to often wait for a willing seller. So a lot of times families own these properties and don't want to sell them. Then after a while, they do. There's a couple of good examples of that. There's the Brand 2 property, and that's right next to Rabbit Mountain open space, if you know where that is. It's 120 acres that basically expanded that area, which is a strategic spot for us, both in terms of recreation for people like for Longmont Lions, but also that has high environmental value, ecological value. Another one's the Tucker Ranch acquisition. That's up by Netherland, west of Netherland. It's 324 acres. It's a big piece of ground. There were 9 development rights that could have gone in there, 9 houses that won't go there now. And it preserves some really good natural resources. And it's a great piece that, again, the county waited a long time to purchase. On the sustainability tax, that's much more recent. That happened in 2016. Thanks to voters. Thank you. You may have voted for that. And it set up the ability to do a lot of sustainability work by OSCR, which is the Office of Sustainability, Climate Action, and Resilience. So you can see it's the sustainability and then the climate work and the resilience all in one place. And they do a lot of work. I'll just mention a few things. In the building environment, Energy Smart, it's your home. If you put energy conserving features in, my wife and I not long ago put in a heat pump. That's eligible, although we did it so late in the year there wasn't any money left for us, but this will help you incentivize that. For businesses, PACE, which is helps businesses do those kinds of things, solar to energy conservation. And you know, the funny thing that people don't realize is the county, as of last year, is 100% electricity is delivered by wind and solar. Not too many places can say that. The county worked on it diligently through the years, and we got it done. On the vehicle side, electric vehicle chargers, helping getting those out so people have more access, especially as people adopt electric vehicles, e-bikes. Every once in a while, there's an incentive program for electric vehicles as well. But basically, getting people to drive a cleaner vehicle is part of what they do. They also work with the cities and help with the programs and cost share so that cities can do more work, so we can all kind of work together to do that. But the open space and sustainability taxes kind of come together as well. They do that with carbon sequestration. So we have a lot of carbon in the atmosphere. We need to try to sequester that so it's not in the atmosphere. And one way to do that is through soil health. And the Sustainability Office had a grant program that helped small farmers have equipment so that they could produce more local food for consumers in Boulder County, and also rejuvenate their soil so that it holds more carbon, holds more water, all those positive benefits. And we're also working with the bigger producers on open space lands on the east part of the county, up by 287 primarily, to do more carbon sequestration. And we've worked with some of those farmers to do experiments to try to get better at doing that. But it's a priority both for open space and for sustainability. And that's where it kind of comes together. So it's your tax dollars that are going to help us continue to lead and address climate and protect our natural lands. And I am very thankful for that. I know the other commissioners are as well. And we're so much better off as a county with both those programs and be leaders on it. And the staff in the end does the great work that makes that happen. And we're really lucky to have top flight people working on these things to advance those goals. So I'm really proud to be part of it and excited to be part of it. And I thought you'd want to know about those two parts as well, two taxes as well, and how they're being used. And that was the whole idea of this town halls, make the budget a little bit more relatable. And I think in the environmental side, you can really do that with open space and sustainability. So that's it for me. I think, Marta, you're up next, I think.
Great. Thank you. I'm going to talk a little bit about worthy cause, and we'll have a slide up in just a minute. But I want to just give a little bit of background. One of the pieces with this town hall and goals for us is really just educating and sharing information, but also making sure folks have the contact information and know where to find that data later. Because as residents in Boulder County, you hear about something interesting or that could be helpful to a neighbor or to a business owner or coworker, we hope that you will pass along this information as well. So I want to talk just a little bit about worthy cause, and just from a, what is it, how much is it? It's funded by 0.05% Boulder County sales and use tax. And what that means, just to give folks an idea in real numbers, in 2020, that was about $3.3 million. And what that does is it allows for funding. So if you know somebody who has a nonprofit who's looking for some help, this might be a solution. There's the requirements, of course, but what it's able to do in Boulder County is assist nonprofit corporations and housing authorities as well, serving for a few different really focused areas. That can be capital purchase, capital construction, capital improvements or renovations, as well as debt reduction that's incurred due to those same capital costs. So, one of the pieces it does require, if you're listening as a nonprofit, like, oh, that means I need to have real estate, I need to have brick and mortar. And this is one solution for folks who've already moved into that area and need that type of assistance. So I'd encourage you again to share that information. The minimum funding request is $75,000. And funds can't cover over 50% of a project's total cost. So again, there's some parameters. The property building where the project is taking place needs to be owned, like I said, so it does require the brick and mortar and the applications. An annual event, so application opens starting in the midsummer, and it's about a 6 to 8 week process. And that, again, we'll provide the worthy cause website here in just a moment. The awarded agencies have access to their award by the end of that same year. And there's part of your agreement, which could end up looking like a 99-year agreement to ensure the long-term service provision. There is a recording of a deed of trust on the property and the amount of that award that would clearly indicate the length of that agreement. And there may be a restrictive covenant that the county would require. So it's just dependent on the nonprofit, on the application and the process. What I will share is that I've had a few different community members reach out and just ask about worthy cause and what's the process. And our staff has been super helpful providing one-on-one appointments to walk folks through the process and talk about, if this isn't the fund for your nonprofit or the folks that which one might be. So I just want to encourage folks to take a look at that. The slide on here shows 2 of the different projects that I just want to highlight in this conversation. One is 1175 Lee Hill Road, and that particular worthy cause grant helps support a 31-unit permanent supportive housing option for individuals and families experiencing homeless here in Boulder County. And the second project indicated there on the slide is Clinica Health Services. which provides medical, behavioral health, and dental care for low-income and underserved community members. And so just to share a couple of different examples, as well as what was talked about earlier, that one was the second one was Clinica, was the $500,000 for purchase of the 7 acres in Lafayette to help develop the 65,000 square foot clinic. So that picture in there is actually 65,000 square feet of building that extended the capacity from 7,000 folks to 10,500 active patients in Boulder County with that service. So those give us a couple examples of what's happening with, again, your generous support as taxpayers and making the choice to use our funding to help nonprofit agencies throughout Boulder County. And I'm going to pass it over to Commissioner Levy.
Well, thank you, Marta. And so back again. And the fund that I'm going to talk about is the Human Services Safety Net Fund. And Commissioner Jones said this at the outset, that we often hear that a government's budget is a moral document and an expression of community values. And I first heard Bill Ritter actually say that in his inaugural address back in 2007 after he was elected. And that really hit me. And that's true, that is what it is. And to me, there's nothing more important for government to do than provide assistance to people who are in need. I know some people feel that that need should be addressed through private philanthropy. And while there is certainly a role for philanthropy, people's basic welfare shouldn't depend on the generosity of individual donors or the capacity of nonprofit sector to secure grants and fund programs. Yet the revenue sources for county government are very restrictive. We don't have a general sales tax, and property taxes are limited by law and state statute as well. So we don't have infinite capacity to fund everything that we feel may be valuable. And so our budget cannot truly reflect our values. And so as with the worthy cause tax that Commissioner Lochamin mentioned, sustainability and open space that Commissioner Jones discussed, Boulder County turned to the voters to ask whether they would be willing and whether they value providing assistance to people whose incomes is not sufficient to meet their basic needs. So the Human Services Safety Net initiative was first approved by Boulder County voters back in 2010, following, or actually in the depths of the Great Recession. And that campaign was called Neighbors Helping Neighbors. And that really reflected the spirit of that initiative. The voters passed it when the state cut human services very substantially because of that recession. And so they were having to cut the very programs that people needed most to help them in this time of need. So that was approved by a very large margin back in 2010. And then in 2014, we went back to the voters and asked to extend that tax. And that passed by 63 to 37%. And it's now been extended for a 15-year period through 2030. And what makes this tax different from the others that we've discussed this evening is that it's a property tax. It's not a sales tax. Sales taxes, you may know, are very regressive in that people with lower incomes spend a greater portion of their income on that sales tax than people with higher incomes, because almost all of the income of lower income people goes towards meeting their basic needs. So everybody pays the same tax on that t-shirt that you buy at Target, regardless of your income, which is what makes it regressive. In contrast, property taxes are more progressive because the more valuable your property is, the more you pay. And I realize that it doesn't entirely recognize that people's income doesn't necessarily rise as the value of their property increases. So it's not a perfect funding source by any means, but it's really the best we have, given that Colorado Constitution does not allow local governments to impose an income tax, which would really be the most equitable way to fund services. So the Human Services Safety Net tax brings in, well, it's a 0.9 mil. Let me tell you, the amount of it. 0.9 mil property tax on homes in Boulder County, actually all commercial property, which amounts to about $45 a year for a house with a taxable value of $500,000. So, it's not a huge amount on each individual property, but collectively, it generates about $8 million a year. And it helps fund critical programming in health, food supports, housing and utility assistance, mental health, child safety, domestic violence services, early childhood and parent education, and LGBTQ supports. And we provide those supports throughout our community. I want to just talk about 2 examples of funding through this $8 million. One is our community partner nonprofits program. And there we take about $3 million a year. That's almost 40% of the revenue that the Safety Net Fund brings in. And that goes to 14 of our community partner organizations to support really vital community work in food, financial, and housing assistance throughout Boulder County. And the funds from the Human Services Safety Net really provide a needed boost to the budgets of these nonprofit organizations. And many of these are organizations that I'm sure you know well. And I believe Julie Van Domelen, who's the president and CEO of Emergency Family Assistance Association, is with us tonight. The second example is the Child Safety and Family Wraparound Supports Fund, which is a little over $2.2 million. And these funds help support the work of Boulder County's family and children's services teams, who focus on keeping children safe by strengthening families with housing and human services help. We try as a value here in Boulder County not to separate children from their families, because we know that in most instances, they really are better off in their home with their family. And the way we do that is by providing these wraparound services to help families meet the needs that they may be struggling to meet so that they can better support their children. Human Services Safety Net funding has provided rent and utility assistance to Boulder County residents who are fleeing domestic and interpersonal violence and experiencing or facing homelessness, many of whom face other barriers to housing. And it's given them room to breathe and time to recover. The housing support boosted by the HSSN funding has helped dozens of these families and individuals transition from emergency shelter and begin to really stabilize and build a plan for safety and self-sufficiency. So it's thanks to this Human Services Safety Net support that Boulder County was able to provide more generous child care assistance through the Colorado Child Care Assistance Program than could have been done just through state funding alone. And that really made Boulder County a leader in the provision of child care assistance. We've by no means met everybody's needs, but we're able to fund a higher level of income and provide a greater subsidy than many other counties in Colorado are, thanks to the generosity of Boulder County taxpayers. So we're really fortunate to have this additional source of financial support to help people here in Boulder County. Boulder County voters really showed their generosity. And when it comes time to ask them to renew this fund in 2030, I hope that they'll do that again. So now let me look. Is it my pleasure to ask the third question? Yes, it is. So I'm going to ask our third and final poll question. You see a map of Boulder County up there on your screen. And we would like to know where you are joining us from tonight. And you'll see options for all the communities in Boulder County, as well as unincorporated Boulder County. And go ahead and just put that in and we'll just see the distribution. It's always interesting to know where people are, and this might actually help us decide what we want to do with our town halls in the future, whether to go out to just communities or continue to do it as we are doing it now. So I will wait for a second and let's see what we have. Okay, it looks like a little over a third are coming from the city of Boulder, 13% from Erie, same percent from Longmont, and 6% from Lyons. That's really great. It's nice to get some distribution. And oh, I didn't scroll down far enough. 38% from unincorporated Boulder County. So thanks for joining us tonight. And I'm going to get Jana back up here. She's going to moderate the question and answer portion of our town hall. We've set aside about 20 minutes, and hopefully we'll have enough time for that, just to take your questions. So far what we've done is given you just an overview, a little maybe spotlight on some programs. And now we'd love to just hear what questions you have for us. What would you like us to be funding here as we begin putting our budget together for 2022?
So as a reminder, you're welcome to send your questions to us through the Q&A function on your screen. Go ahead and hit that button and send your questions in. We have a question here from Julie. So Julie asks, the 2022 recommended budget document only gives overall fund levels. Could the commissioners or staff please comment on 2022 programmatic priorities in the human service area and priorities in general for COVID recovery? Commissioners, would one of you like to take that one?
Well, I'm happy to, and I think maybe my fellow commissioners may want to join me in that. You know, Julie, thanks for the question. We're just at the beginning of the process, and we haven't made any final decisions here. But I'll share something that we were talking about last week that we returned to today. And again, no decisions have been made, but it's on the topic of behavioral health, mental health, opioid, substance abuse treatment. The county will be receiving funding from the opioid settlement, and we'll be able to use that for certain programs that are authorized by those settlement documents. And at the same time, we know that behavioral health services, focusing on the mental health side, is a really high need in Boulder County as it is elsewhere. And so one request that has come in is to really consolidate those services and look more strategically at what are we funding, what are we missing, or can we do it more effectively through other means. And right now we don't have the resources to even ask or answer those questions. And so this is one area that I hope that we will be able to address. I know we're going to give it really strong consideration. Matt, Marta, anything to add there?
Yeah, I think you're right, Claire. We're just beginning to kind of sort out all these decisions, and the question talked about the recommended budget. So that already has additions that were high priority that were put in the budget. And now we're going to sort out both capital projects, you know, like computer programs and that kind of thing, and equipment, and also staff, FTEs as we call them, full-time equivalents. That's our code for a staff member. So we're still sorting that out, and human services is a big part of the budget, as you heard earlier from Jana, and it's such an important part. The county does so much great service that way, and there's so much need. So we're going to be working into that.
I was just going to add, and I put it in the chat, the specific dates and times. You can certainly get on the bouldercounty.org website for folks who are listening and interested. But I think to me, that's one of the big opportunities is the date on October 26th at 3 p.m. And we're planning to break for dinner. We're planning to maybe have a midnight snack if we need to, but that just means that public testimony will be taken. And for folks who really want to get more information as we continue to be informed and hear from our different department heads and certainly elected officials about where the needs are and how to prioritize those needs, that would be where I would welcome folks to participate and join in.
You know, I think I would say one more thing actually to this point, and that is a request that we got through the Human Services Alliance to increase the grants that we fund, many of them through the Human Services Safety Net, because we're trying to provide a livable wage here for county workers. I know our nonprofit organizations want to do that as we come out of the pandemic. People are realizing, or maybe I shouldn't say realizing, they've known this all along, they're not getting paid enough. And many of them are in the nonprofit sector and they're helping people, and even they are struggling to make ends meet. And so there was a request for a 3.5% increase in the contract amount that we provide to some of our safety net providers, the nonprofits that help us do our job. And that's something I believe we did give the green light on. And because we know that, we can't ask you to do more without helping you pay your staff a living wage. So that's something that has come to us, and I believe we're prepared to act on that.
Thank you, Commissioners. That was the only question we got. I'll just add one more nuance to that for community members who may be wondering. The recommended budget in the hearing on October 26th is not inclusive of the ARPA federal funding for the American Rescue Act money coming down to federal government. The commissioners will be making decisions about those dollars at a later point in time. So just wanted to add that clarification since COVID was a part of that question. So I think I do have one more poll question before we get into public comment. I don't know if we can put that poll question up, but this is a question about remote work. So if you became a remote worker during the pandemic, have you returned to your work site and gone back to work? I'll give you all a minute to respond to that question, and we'll see who we have on the call and if we have any remote workers with us today. Our results should be popping up here, and it looks like hybrid is the winner. So 6 of our 10 respondents are working in a hybrid situation, and 3 are still working from home. We've got 1 who's back on site. So thank you for participating in that poll. And with that, Commissioner Jones, I will turn the meeting over to you for public comment.
Thanks, Jenna. Yeah, it's really interesting how the hybrid option after the pandemic's had a lot of headaches, but there are some things that probably advanced our society. And that option, because of technology, is there. So it's interesting to see how many people are choosing that. And the county is doing similar. So we're going to do public comment. You were asked to email if you wanted to comment ahead of time. And so we had 7 people sign up. It's 3 minutes each. Please say your name and your address. Also, with your comments, please be respectful of others. And we have a real opportunity in our democracy to speak out and address grievances, as they say in the Constitution. And so please be respectful in your comments. And I'm going to just start at the top here unless I get told by staff otherwise.
Commissioner Jones, this is Natalie Springett for the record here. I did just want to jump in and let you know it looks like Riley Mancuso and Scott Kieselbach are not joining us. And if they are on, if they could please raise their hand. But we'll go ahead and get started with Edward Yagi. I just didn't want Edward to be surprised that he was going, or that they were going first.
That's staff saying otherwise, by the way. Thank you, Natalie. Appreciate it. Edward? Are you there, Ed?
Edward, yes.
Edward, sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. Are my audio and video all right?
I hear you.
Okay. My name is Edward Yagi. I'm a retired U.S. naval officer, a retired career U.S. diplomat, and a retired tenured full professor of business administration. I am currently in Japan, where I teach university part-time while studying full-time for a doctorate in business administration. I am also co-owner of fifth-generation family property on Big Owl Road in Allens Park. Budget allocation is the heart of any business administration, including county government. I have 3 suggestions that I strongly urge you to adopt. 1, please develop a better mechanism for setting your priorities. Listening to not in my backyard complaints is an unavoidable part of your job, but it should never be more than that. Debating the snow plowing of a single private driveway in Allens Park is not how 3 commissioners should spend an afternoon. Assuming leadership positions on things like climate change and social issues is very admirable, but has little or no impact beyond the Boulder city limits. I suggest that you focus like a laser on 2 things. 1 is outstanding administration of basic county services. The second is hard, probably very painful decisions about the population explosion, both residents and visitors along the Front Range. As a species and as communities, we are the frog in the pot and the water is now boiling. Until we get serious about this, frankly, nothing else matters. 2, Boulder County needs to rethink its employee structure. The vast majority of your employees are beyond reproach, but your systems do not prevent a loose cannon or a bad policy from a past age from doing catastrophic damage. I suspect that you, like many organizations, suffer from a dangerous gap in middle management, people with 10 or 15 years of experience who know how to link high-level policies and the past with realities on the ground and the future. The fix will be very long-term, so the time to start is now. 3, please simplify your procedures without an over-reliance on technology. Technology is our enemy as well as our friend. For example, your building permit system is currently so tech-oriented instead of customer-oriented that I estimate that 95% of everything in the mountains that should have a county safety check is done without a permit, and your own permit department doesn't dispute my estimate. When you don't balance the public good, private rights, and real-world limitations just right, you can do more harm than good, and that's really bad, since once government gets into the harm business, it destroys the credibility it needs to do any good. These 3 recommendations, priorities, county staff management, including higher salaries, and listening to taxpayers with less technology and more respect, are all interconnected. But if you need a place to begin, start with us taxpayers for a great reason. Your harshest critics often have the best solutions to your problems. Thank you for listening, and this concludes my remarks.
Thank you, Edward. So we'll go to our next person. Just to remind people, we have interpreters, and if you can slow down a little bit, it helps them out, both in ASL and Spanish interpreters. So Bob Hunnis, if you say your name and your address, it'd be great. There you are, Bob. We see you.
Okay, thank you. So my name is Bob Hunnis. I live at 4650 Pleasant Ridge Road, Boulder, 80301. Ironically, today is the 1-year anniversary of the East Troublesome Fire. And closer to home, you certainly recognize the Cameron Peak and Calwood fires that burned at the same time. Wildfire is personal for me. Wildfire destroyed the home that my wife and son and I built with our own hands. None of us wants another fire year like 2020. As you're working through the current budget process, I'm requesting that you commit partial funding to increase fire safety by stopping dispersed shooting in the mountain areas. That commitment will confirm Boulder County's support for a public shooting range that your board approved last December. And based on current conditions, the approved phase 1 work will probably cost about $5 million. I'm suggesting that a $2 million commitment from Boulder County is appropriate to help make this local project into a future reality. That commitment could be spread out over 1 or 2 or even 3 years, but it would send a strong message to other funding agencies that Boulder County will support this project. And that should also help free up other grant funding sources which have been hanging back to see if Boulder County will really support the national forest closures that are being proposed. State government already stepped up by awarding $900,000 in grants through CPW. And CPW expects an additional $300,000 in grants to be awarded in 2022 and probably in 2023. The federal government met their commitment by adopting the National Forest Plan Amendment that will close 80,000 acres to disperse shooting. Boulder Rifle Club did its part by providing a facility location and by funding the extensive and expensive special use review application that your board reviewed. Clear Creek and Gilpin counties have committed funds for ranges in their jurisdictions. So it's time for Boulder County to do its part. Let's not wait until someone is shot in a dispersed shooting accident, or let's not wait for another wildfire to be caused by dispersed shooting. Sheriff Pelley has testified that dispersed shooting caused several fires in Boulder County in the past. So here's an opportunity for you to protect 80,000 acres from environmental degradation and potential wildfire risk, not to mention the protection of human safety that has been requested by so many mountain residents. So please budget $2 million for this important project into the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Next, we'll go to Scott Kieselbach, excuse me. Unmute your phone and your video, open your video. It's on the lower left-hand side of the screen.
Thank you.
There you are.
Hi, my name's Scott Kieselbach. I live at 1104 Wagon Wheel Gap Road. I appreciate the time to address some concerns I have living here on Wagon Wheel Gap Road, and I'm trying to understand more about opportunities in my neighborhood corridor that I might have in conducting a speed management plan and requesting a traffic calming project. Wagon Wheel Gap Road has experienced a variety of new transportation issues as a result of the improvement made from the 2013 flood. As a result of these improvements along the corridor and the road's new paved surface, there has been expanded usage due to the popularity of the newly rehabbed Ann White Trail. More bicycle riders are discovering this roadway as they exit off Lee Hill and ride up to the end of Wagon Wheel or over Bow Mountain. More visitors are driving to enjoy Ann White. When parking fills at the trailhead, they park along Wagon Wheel at designated areas. These guests, many families, are then walking along a very busy Wagon Wheel up to Pinto to the trailhead. There is no shoulder, and we have lots of traffic that I believe is speeding. Also, I'm sad to say my neighbors above us and guests and service providers often travel at these increased rates of speed. This might have been softened had we implemented the speed management plan outlined in the original flood rehab plans and shared with us. In fact, the original speed management plans included speed signs, speed humps between 67 Wagon Wheel and 1073, 597 Wagon Wheel and 763 Wagon Wheel, and between 853 and 837 Wagon Wheel. At one point of the project, Andrew Barth determined the need to conduct a survey to determine if members of the neighborhood.
Scott,
Yes.
hey, Scott, can you slow down just a little bit? Our interpreters are having trouble keeping up, but we'll let you go over a little over 3 minutes if you're afraid you're not going to get there.
All right. Yeah, I was practicing and I apologize.
I figured. All right.
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
At one point of the project, Andrew Barth determined the need to conduct a survey to determine if members of the neighborhood still wanted these designated speed humps. After a vote that I believe included not only residents who live on Wagon Wheel, but also neighbors from Carriage Hills, speed bumps were removed from installation. Recently, Josh Trickey, traffic operations engineer, has responded to my written request for neighborhood assistance, and I appreciate that. I was also informed that I could apply in writing to request a speed study, speed management plan, and traffic calming projects, and I hope to do so. I believe if the traffic management plan originally outlined in the plans from the flood mitigation had been done with speed bumps and signage, we would not be where we are today. There was a digital speeding zone installed with radar speed limit readouts on Lower Wagon Wheel, but nothing done in an area that sees way more visitors, foot traffic, neighborhood traffic, parking, and pedestrians. It also includes a place where children are picked up and dropped off twice a day, and there's never been a bus sign alerting people that this was a place where parents brought and retrieved kids right there on Bow Mountain. I do appreciate the work that's been done, but I am disappointed the traffic mitigation strategies outlined in the overall flood mitigation plan were changed or never completed. Finally, we're all saddened by the death of a bicyclist at the corner of Wagon Wheel and Lee Hill. When you pull out from Wagon Wheel, the curve is very sharp, and it's quite easy to miss speeding bicyclists traveling east downhill on Lee Hill. There should be signs warning motorists to look carefully, as well as a sign for bicyclists to be in more control of their speeds, as I often get tailgating, slipstreaming, and speeding down that roadway. I appreciate the opportunity to get a traffic management plan for Wagon Wheel Gap Road. It's a beautiful little corridor, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Scott. All right, next on the list is Scott Porter. So your name and your address. I see you, Scott.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can.
Perfect. My name is Scott Porter. I live at 470 Teresa in our neighborhood is Fairview Estates, so in an unincorporated Boulder County. I'd like to speak about an area of spending I didn't really hear discussed tonight, and that's the shameful condition of the neighborhood roads in unincorporated Boulder County. As I said, I live in Fairview Estates, and I can tell you that the need to address this issue is desperate, as our neighborhood roads are in terrible shapes now. I'd like to remind the commission that these roads are physical assets deeded over to the county with the agreement that the county would assume responsibility for repair and maintenance. In the case of Fairview Estates, that deed grant had to occur in the 1950s or early 1960s. In the 90s, the commission quietly redefined maintenance to include only minor repairs and occasionally removing snow. It clearly does not include things like crack sealing, blacktopping, preventative maintenance, all those activities that are required to maintain and extend the life of those assets. It is the case we can request the repair of a pothole or something like that, but I can tell you this is not a very effective activity. It takes lots of calls and follow-up to actually get action. The crew shows up and they'll repair one specific pothole, leaving 2 or 3 other defects or potholes within a few feet completely untouched. I'm not sure who is contracted to perform these repairs, but I've personally witnessed crews sitting around in their trucks for a couple hours only to jump out at the last minute, throw some blacktop in a hole, inadequately tamp it, and then call it done and drive off. And if there's any quality checks or followed by the county, it's certainly not apparent to me. In the recent past, the previous commission tried to implement special taxation imposed only on the residents of those subdivisions to make up for the county's lack of repair and maintenance over the past couple of decades. This was, in my opinion, completely unfair, and I was glad to see that it was deemed illegal. So finally, I want to recall that several of you ran for the commission on election platforms, which included finding a repair and equitable solution for this problem. Perhaps progress has been made on creating and rolling out that solution. I certainly heard nothing about it tonight, but if you have made progress, I would love to hear about it, and I would like to help if I can. But this is a problem that your predecessors created for the county by redefining maintenance, and this is a problem with which you must now deal. I urge you to take responsible, fair action to immediately begin the repair of these neighborhood roads. Again, these are county assets that can only be fixed by the county, and in their current condition represents a safety issue, a quality of life issue, and something that affects our property values, which I learned tonight makes up more than 45% of your funding. So I think it's important to us for lots of reasons. We need to fund this and get it started immediately. Thank you for your time. And as I said, I would love to help. You're on mute, Matt.
You're on mute.
3 for 3. Next up is Margaret Rogers. Please state your name and your address.
Yes, good evening. My name is Margaret Rogers. My address is 470 Teresa Drive in Boulder. And I wanted to thank the commissioners, Levy, Lochamin, and Jones for holding a town hall this evening. My topic is going to be the Rocky Mountain Metropolitan Airport. I come from a family of airline employees, and so I understand both sides of the conversation that would be taking place. The things that I would like to point out this evening, my concerns are there was a noise reduction roundtable put in place. They met on the 14th of January. As far as I can tell from the website, that is the last time they met. There are no updates further from there. There are a number of frequently asked questions that are posted, which are somewhat helpful. For example, they mentioned that the flights, the aircraft have to take off into the wind. And so they're heading northwest, and that's us. So we're getting a lot of these flights coming overhead. And so as far as the noise reduction, the first question that I have would be hours. Is there a way to limit the hours that those planes take off? Because they do have a tendency, and it is stated on their website, that they're a 24/7 airport. The next thing would be the frequency. There were times in the summer on a nice weather day that the planes were going over our home every 2 minutes. It was a very steady takeoff. The next thing is I was going out one morning to work in my garden, and as I stepped out the back door, a plane flew overhead, and it was barely higher than the trees. And so that was a little startling. Again, if you look on their website, they're saying that the minimum would be 500 feet to 1,000 feet. And then they ask that I get the call numbers of the off of the tail, but I can assure you that I was startled enough that I did not get the numbers of that particular aircraft. The other thing that the noise roundtable would not address would be the quality of life and health, because the gasoline that's used by general aviation aircraft is called avgas, AVGAS. Avgas is leaded. And as you know, we got rid of leaded fuel in our cars a long time ago. So that means that the planes going overhead are spewing lead. And the FAA is working on that, but there's no solution yet for that. Finally, Joe Neguse in one of his town halls indicated that there might be a lawsuit. And so I'm wondering if the commissioners have any updates for us. Thank you again.
Commissioner Jones, this is Natalie for the record. If you could unmute, please.
Pardon me?
You were muted.
Yes, I know. Marty Hopper is up next.
Okay, hi. Thank you, commissioners. And my name is Marty Hopper. I live in Boulder. I gave my specific address to Jennifer in advance, prefer that. I'm speaking tonight as I have a very serious concern about your decision to mandate COVID vaccinations for county employees. According to the Boulder County Public Health website, The percentages of vaccinated residents in Boulder County are lower for residents of color than for white residents. Specifically, the vaccination rate for white residents is 81%, compared to American Indians, 69%, Black residents, 66%, and the lowest rate is for Latino residents at 53%. Obviously, there are many reasons for these discrepancies, but one possible reason is that people of color in this country have extraordinarily good historical reasons not to trust governmental mandates when it comes to medical interventions, let alone injections. As a result, I ask you to consider whether you are implementing a racist policy, even if unintentional. You may also be thinking that COVID vaccines are perfectly safe, but what you don't hear on the nightly news are the high numbers of reported deaths and injuries. Our nation's vaccine safety monitoring system, called VAERS, requires medical personnel in the US to report all vaccine injuries. This system is co-managed by the CDC and the FDA. As of today, VAERS reported over 770,000 injuries from COVID vaccines, and the number of deaths is now at 16,310, with the vast majority of those being within the first 2 days of receiving the shot. By contrast, the swine flu vaccination program in 1976 was halted after 53 people died. You may also be thinking that at least one vaccine has FDA approval and is therefore safe. But please remember that these vaccines have been implemented for less than 1 year, which means by definition, there are no long-term safety data available. What if an employee does not meet your requirements for a medical or religious exemption, but rather they are simply concerned about this injection for some of the reasons I've mentioned? What has happened to our fundamental right to make personal health decisions without government intervention? As commissioners, you say that your hope is, quote, that this policy will motivate the remaining staff who aren't vaccinated to go ahead and do it. Requiring Boulder County employees to be vaccinated or forfeit their livelihoods is not motivation, it's coercion. Thank you.
Thank you, Marty. That's the last person signed up. I don't think Riley is on. Riley, last call. If you're here, please raise your hand to be recognized. So with that, we'll close the public comment. And it is 6:55 and 7 o'clock is when we are scheduled to end.
Well, let's bring up our last poll question. This would be great timing. And as it's being brought up, I just want to share that we are finishing up this week. Today is really the last 24 hours. So the question is regarding the American Rescue Plan Act. Have you shared your input for Boulder County's Community ARPA survey yet? This survey is at bouldercountysurvey.com. So the response is either yes, I've already completed, I've already given my input to the Boulder County Commissioners on where I would like to see the American Rescue Plan funds spent. No, I haven't. Or the last one is I will do it tonight. We would love your input. This is an opportunity, it's the very first phase of this process. And if you're interested, it is the YouTube recording of our previous virtual town hall that shared the information overview of the $63.3 million that we're receiving here in Boulder County. The community engagement process is shared on there, and questions and answers from the public, from Boulder County residents. So our response, this is great. And I say it's great because 73% of you have not yet responded and you still have time. So we appreciate those of you who have taken, it's only 5 questions. It's your opportunity to respond to the question of where would you like to see ARPA funds spent here locally to help us as residents, business owners, community members. So that, thank you for participating, and I hope you'll join in that survey as it ends tomorrow on October 15th.
All right, we have each 1 minute to do wrap up. Thanks everybody for tuning in and letting us know how you feel on issues and listening about the budget. I mean, like I said earlier, it's a moral document, and it's important, and it doesn't get enough attention. So we thought we'd bring a spotlight and try to make it a little bit more interesting and relatable. And I appreciate you tuning in. Marty, do you want to jump in?
Sure. Thank you, everyone. Again, a huge shout out to Boulder County staff, those of you who participated in putting this forum together this evening. And for those of you who are participating, it's a task to work all day and then join in, but it's learnings. And so I just really appreciate that. And certainly to the residents who are joining us in, again, I hope that you'll take some of these points of information and data and share them with community members, with your neighbors and your friends, so that we can continue to really push out the community engagement, the resources, the programs that Boulder County is providing, and also to those who signed up ahead of time to present. Your comments and your information is really important, so we appreciate that.
And I guess I'm going to close us out here tonight, and also thank everybody who joined us. I'm really glad that we were able to make the last 30 minutes available for public comment, whatever's on your mind. This was a tradition of Boulder County, and it was suspended in the beginning of the pandemic as the county transitioned to virtual meetings. And I think it's something that's been missing. And so we're experimenting with whether to do it in conjunction with our town halls or to bring it back to that 11:30 on a Tuesday morning time slot to just see what works better, what's better for people. I know showing up at the courthouse at 11:30 on a work day, finding parking, coming up, speaking for 3 minutes, and leaving isn't the best way to address your elected officials. So we're searching still for what's the sweet spot. It was important for us to hear from you tonight. The things that you raised and you questioned, well, where are you on this? How come we're not hearing anything from you on this? These are things we actually are working on. And so we need to make sure that we keep you informed. Subdivision paving, the problem of shooting in the mountains, and what are we doing with the Boulder Rifle Club, safety on Wagon Wheel Gap and the tragedy of a person killed on that road, the airport noise, your feelings about the vaccination requirement. These are all important topics for us to hear about. And I want to thank you for sharing your thoughts with us. So as we close out, I think we're going to put a slide up to tell you about our final town hall of 2021. There it is. It's going to be on November 10th, 5:30, the usual time. And we have not selected a topic. So if you've got ideas about things that you would like to hear more about, please go ahead and send an email to commissioners@bouldercounty.org. And we'll take that into account as we continue to present these town halls and try to come to you where you are. So thank you so much for joining us. And thanks again to staff for all your hard work.